Hello there, my friends, and welcome to this O&M webinar. I'm Chris Marcus of Arcadia Economics, former equity options trader, Wharton grad, and turned business owner and gold and silver analyst, and excited that you're here for this silver webinar today. If you're familiar with if you've seen any of my content before, you know I'm a big silver fan, and a lot of reasons to be excited about silver, and especially the possibility of the leverage that you can get through the silver stocks. And fortunately, I know you're going to be learning about Mag Silver today, which is a silver stock that I do like and have heard a lot of good things about, have met their management. So I think you'll be in good hands when it comes to the Mag portion of this call. But certainly with the silver stocks, I mean, there's going to be a high leverage to the silver price, gold stocks to the gold price, where now if you have that sweet spot where you have a great gold or silver environment and you have a company that's well run and knows how to deliver shareholder value, that's why I think as many people as they do stick through the bear markets. Certainly, we've just lived through one that was quite severe, and there's people who say, gee, we've seen the Fed print everything, including the kitchen sink. When is the price finally going to rise? Well, first, let's remember that gold, for the gold crowd, we're not talking about one day anymore. We've seen gold over $2,000, closer to $1,900 recently, but silver also has finally moved. Yet, really, when you think about what's happening in the context of the world right now, where just reviewing the last 6 months of the Federal Reserve, from quantitative easing to unlimited quantitative easing to 0% interest rates till 2022, then the new whopper of changing the definition of inflation, which seems certainly pretty incredible. Now 0% rates until 2023. And as a lot of the guests, I'm fortunate to have the privilege of speaking with investors and successful fund managers, investors from around the globe on a show that I host. No one can figure out any way that the Fed can ever raise interest rates without crashing the system. You got a little snippet of that in 2018. So certainly there are a lot of reasons to be attracted to gold and silver right now. Yet today we're going to break the rules a little bit. I know I was given the honor of presenting on silver for O&M for this webinar. Although I'm going to go off script, sometimes it's worth doing. And rather than focusing on silver, because certainly, I mean, we could have a long call just talking about the virtues of silver, the imbalance in the market, and some of the incredible uses of silver. What might happen if you have a spark in investment demand, similar to what you saw in 1980, you got a glimpse of in 2011. Keep in mind that while gold is near its all-time high, silver only half of that. But instead of talking about silver, change the rules today and touch on something that I know is on a lot of people's minds, which is the US election and all of the theatrics that go along with US politics. And don't worry, because we're not going to get into the Democrats did this, the Republicans did that, except to point out that it doesn't matter which party is in power. It doesn't matter whether Biden wins, whether Trump wins, whether some other third-party candidate comes out of left field and wins. What we know is that in either scenario, more money is going to be printed. It's this late in the game. I keep an eye on the U.S. debt clock because it moves quickly. It's over 27 trillion, and in the debates, if anyone heard, what were the candidates' answers when they were asked about deficit reduction or how the money's ever going to be repaid? Yet the questions weren't even asked, let alone answers thought of. And yet instead we see that Congress and the banks and the president, they're working out the next stimulus bill. So we fired off 3 trillion a couple months ago. That wasn't enough. It's back for round two, which is not by any means to belittle the situation that many people are in, and certainly it would be a lot easier to at least feel somewhat good about it if the money were going to the people that actually were affected, as opposed to some of the ways that it gets directed. But nonetheless, you've seen this pattern that even this late in the game, money's being printed, more money is going to be printed, and whoever wins the election, more money is going to be printed on top of that. But even aside from the printed money, when you look, and as you're watching these debates and you're seeing, and again, this isn't to take sides, but when you look at the coverage of politics and see that it's not, hey, well, we should really get together because this is for the good of the people, but there's so much that we've just become accustomed to it. Well, hey, we want our side to win, so the people be damned, we're going to do this. And you look and think, and the reason I bring this up is not to have a rant criticizing politicians, but simply from an investor standpoint. If you were sitting in on a management presentation or an earnings call and you saw that, I just ask you, would you invest in a company that was run in the way we see Congress and the American political system run? Does that, we see that, when money gets lost, then there's no review. There's no, how do we fix this? What went wrong here? How do we improve on this? How do we prevent it from happening again? Which is what is a requirement of a private business. Okay, but the government basically has the Fed and the printing press, so it gets away with that. But it's interesting in that in any other scenario, and in fact, you saw this beautifully detailed in the movie The Big Short, that scene at the end where I believe there was a presentation about Bear Stearns, and as the management was talking, people were running out to sell the stock. And I think if only there were a way, when you see government, you see Pelosi, McConnell, Trump, Biden, whoever, and again, I'm not trying to criticize anyone's favorite politician, but simply from the economic standpoint, that whether it was George Bush doubling the debt from 5 to 10 trillion, or Obama doubling it from 10 to 20, now it's up to 27. And Scott, I'm going to take that again before the clocks went off, so we might have one small cut there if that's okay. Now there's another one chirping. And so from the standpoint that is not, again, a matter of criticizing political preferences, but just looking at the economics where whatever side is in wins and spends. And if you sit there and say, wow, if there was some way that were an entity that you could actually short, or how would you approach that as an investor? Certainly the antithesis of that, what I would really drew, and again, to be clear, I didn't have some gold or silver fetish my entire life that just said I'll wake up and talk about this one day. As I saw what happened when the subprime bubble collapsed, as I was working on a trading floor and saw that none of the people around me had seen it in advance. Ben Bernanke didn't see it in advance. He said subprime was contained, yet we saw what really happened, and it was interesting to me that all the people who saw that in advance, that I talked to on my show, that you hear on these webinars, that start these gold and silver companies, it's not a random accident, but they're looking at some very logical forces in the same way people looked at what was happening prior to the collapse of the subprime bubble. So if you're sitting there watching, arguments about who's printing money fast enough or who's going to send the bigger stimulus check, from my trading background, I found it good to remember there's the things that I want or think should happen or are fair. And then there's what's going to happen. And when you boil all that down, at the end of the day, you have silver sitting there at not only less than a half of its 2011 high, but at even less than a half of its 1980 high. And folks, I don't think Paul Volcker or anyone like him is going to be raising interest rates to 5% or 2%, let alone 20%. And lastly, while by nature, these types of events, you're not going to get an official date and warning of when it's going to happen. I don't know. Maybe you'd have to be okay. Maybe government does what it does for another however many years. Maybe it's your children that benefit from it. But at least for those who are in the privileged situation of having the advantage of being able to patiently invest for the long term, when I look at everything that's happening right now, that is what leads me to silver. So with that said, I'm excited myself to hear the call on Mag Silver today. You're going to be in good hands, and thank you as always for being here. I do appreciate that.